Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Gochujang Cook. Today we're doing a Szechuan stir fry called mapo tofu. It's a dish that my grandma used to make for me when I was a little kid. It kind of looked a whole lot like a chili, actually, because I'm pretty sure she was adjusting it in ways that would get tiny children to eat it. So the version that I have grown up eating now is very much inspired by my grandma's version, which is pretty Americanized. So we're going to take a look at a couple of the different things that my grandma was doing to make that kind of more palatable. And I think kind of coming pretty close to it. I actually have no idea how my grandma was making mapo tofu, but the way that I do it, it incorporates a couple of things that make it a little bit more sweet and a little bit have a couple of more Americanized elements to it that kind of will get tiny children to eat it. So if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about mapo tofu, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, at the very least entertaining to watch. For those of you who are new to the series, we're here streaming every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on the channel every Friday. The particular mapo tofu that we're cooking today is actually the very first recipe that came out on the channel many years, many months ago. I think that was sometime in early 2020. So if you're looking for that stuff, it all lives as a recipe over on the YouTube channel already. Definitely, if you have not yet checked out the YouTube channel, definitely go and find that. Lots of fun stuff coming up. Last Friday, we did a recipe for what do we do? Oh, we did Vietnamese vermicelli noodles. So we did a lemongrass chicken over vermicelli noodles. That was really tasty. Friday before that, we did a Thai dish called larb gai, which is a ground chicken lettuce wrap, I guess. Comes from Thai cuisine. This Friday coming up is going to be, we're doing a hot and spicy chow mein, which is going to be really tasty. And it's loosely inspired by one that you can find at a really popular restaurant here in the Oakland, California area called Shandong. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely make your way over to YouTube. Check out what's going on over there. We've got new stuff coming up every Friday. Viva Habit Van Assen. Hello from San Francisco. Yeah, hello from Oakland. Always cool to see people, local folks tuning in. That's really fun. You don't always find a lot of local Bay Area folks tuning in on the YouTube channel. So hello, good to see you. If you are local to the Bay Area, definitely check out Shandong in Oakland. That's where the recipe that's coming out is going to be inspired by. It's from Shandong, Oakland. They are a very popular noodle dish. Generally, when folks ask for recommendations for Chinese food in Oakland or even in the Bay Area in general, Shandong is probably within the first 3 things that most folks will recommend. So, super popular spot. So the recipe, all this to say, the recipe that's coming out tomorrow is loosely inspired by that hot and spicy chow mein that you'll find at Shandong in Oakland, which I happen to live down the street from. Cool. So what we're doing right now, what I just talked through, that was 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, which I did. Did not really do much of a mince on. Once you crush that garlic, it really just sort of starts falling apart on you. So you don't have to be super careful with your fine minces on that garlic. Then we're kind of going out of order right now. But what we're doing right now is our green onions, which this is the greens of my green onions, which I'm setting aside. The leafy green part of your green onion, they're really delicate. You don't want to throw that into your wok fry because it will probably just sort of wilt. What I like to do is reserve them as garnishes. They're really pretty, but also they are a little bit more flavorful and have a little bit more of an interesting quality to it when kept raw. And then what we're going to do is reserve the whites that's actually going to go into our stir fry. And then last up, so the last thing that's considered a portion of our aromatics in our wok fry today is going to be, this is about an inch's worth of ginger that we're working with today. It's really old ginger, actually, because I forgot to buy ginger today. So, but ginger, if you're not familiar, it has a really long shelf life because it's a root vegetable, sort of like how a potato has a really long shelf life. So it will eventually go bad. Eventually it starts molding. Once you start seeing mold growing on your ginger, that means it's probably time to throw it out. But they usually will take a couple of months, depending on how humid it is wherever you are. It will take a couple of months for that ginger to start going bad. So you can definitely keep this on hand in your pantry for a while before it starts spoiling. So what I like to do, especially when I'm working with ginger, is give it a peel with the flat side of a spoon, which is what we just did. and that rougher skin, the exterior first layer, comes from. It's very gentle. And then what we're going to do is a fine mince, so we're starting off by going for our diced first. We're done with the second half. So slices down the middle. And if we stopped here, this would be a rough dice here. So then what we're going to do instead, though, is go for our fine mince, which is essentially all about persistence, just running our knife through it. Very helpful if you have a sharp knife at this point. If you've got a dull knife, fine minces, they can take forever. Also, though, if you don't like doing knife work, if you hate doing fine minces for whatever reason, you can also definitely get your micropoints out, and this will go very easily with a nice micropoint. But then after that, you have to clean your microplane, which is annoying, and I hate cleaning microplanes. Alright, so that's our ginger. We're going to set that aside. One more dish here. And then what you will often see when you are reading up on Wok Can Cook recipes, you'll often see something referred to as the aromatics of a wok fry. So that's going to be very, very often. These three things, so there's our garlic, our ginger, and this is the whites of our green onions with the greens of our green onions over here. Reserved as a garnish, so we're going to throw these in very, very late. They're going to be the last thing that go on top because we're keeping them raw. They're actually not going to get cooked at all. Cool. What kind of cutting board? It is a, I always forget what makes this. Yeah, gripper board. It's called a gripper board. My favorite part about this cutting board is that it has these grips on the bottom, which keep it from sliding around. Very, very, very useful. It keeps it from moving around. If you're working with a cutting board that doesn't have grips, there's also a really simple solution to that. Just get a wet paper towel and it won't quite slide around as much. The downside to having a gripper board is that because it has those grips on the bottom, it makes it harder to, you can't use the other side so very often. You'll see cutting boards that'll be double-sided. So you might often see is a cutting board, the first side will be used for veggies, the second side might be used for raw meat, like what we're about to do. Downside of a gripper board is that you can't use it. You can't use that other side because it's got those grips on the bottom. So, but anyway, moving on. You like bamboo? Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, bamboo is too hard. Yeah. So yeah, my experience with bamboo cutting boards, this might be just a personal experience, but my experience with bamboo cutting boards is that they always sort of like, they start denting really quickly. And that might be from like cutting too hard. So if you're chopping really aggressively, that bamboo, what happens is you'll start seeing like a dent where the knife is cutting into, and then they really don't last super long. So I've had to throw out a lot of bamboo cutting boards. I've also come across a lot of used bamboo cutting boards where they're like basically unusable because they're so uneven. So yeah, Jupiter. Yeah, so can you. Wok Can Cook, so can you. Who can cook, you can eat. That's what we've been saying lately. I forgot the cornstarch. So for our ground mince today, so this is probably the only meat that goes in a mapo tofu. Today we're using, this is ground turkey. You can also, probably the most traditional thing would be ground pork. You can also use ground chicken, you can use ground beef, whatever kind of ground mince that you happen to have will probably work just fine. As I often say, the more important thing is that whatever mince that you are using, it's got to be a high fat content ground mince. So the ground turkey that we're using today is at 85-15, which is like almost basically fatty enough to make a hamburger out of. You could probably make a good turkey burger out of this. That fat is going to be really, really important because it's how we're going to develop those nice, thick, cohesive sauces. Yeah. So yeah, what I always say is anytime that we're working with a ground mince, that you want to make sure that you have lots of fat content. So when I work with ground pork, it's always very fatty ground pork. If you ever see me working with ground beef, usually it's an 80-20 chop, something like that, which also very good for a hamburger. What I always say is if it's good for a hamburger, it's probably pretty good for a stir fry too. Cool. So that's our ground pork. Next up is going to be our tofu. So lots of folks have been asking me about vegetarians wok fries, so vegetarian options, because I don't have very many vegetarian options. What I always say is that the mapo tofu is really good to make vegetarian, because you could basically just leave out that ground pork and it has a whole bunch of protein in it, which is coming from this tofu. So lots of folks, especially like Americans, look down on tofu because they think that it's like flavorless, which is technically true. But there are a whole bunch of Chinese recipes that use tofu in it that have lots of fun qualities to it. So I always love using tofu. It's just a matter of how you treat the tofu. It's all about like how you're approaching that tofu, and the reason why lots of folks think that tofu is so flavorless. It's all stemming from the fact that there's all of these really, really terrible vegetarian recipes out there that treat tofu like it's meat, which it is not. Tofu will never be meat. Stop treating it like it's meat. It's never going to be meat. The way that most Chinese recipes will approach tofu, especially when you're working with soft or silk tofu like this, is going to be all about treating it like a garnish that goes on top almost. So that that tofu in our mapo tofu is going to be basically used like at the very, very end. It's almost the entire time that it's in the cook time is really going to be about like maybe 5 minutes. After that, we're going to remove it, and then it's really going to just stand there on its own. So that really helps because it's so delicate. We're not really going to do too much to cook with it, otherwise it's going to start falling apart. Cool, so next up I'm moving on to our sauce element here. So this is where all of the flavor is going to come from. We're starting things off, that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. And this is next is going to be 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. And finally 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. And from there, that's really like the fundamental basics that go in most stir fries. Those probably 3 elements. We have our umami in that soy sauce. We have a little bit of brightness coming from that vinegar and a little bit of fat coming from that sesame oil. And then next, we're going to start leaning into all of the things that I think my grandma was using, or like my best guess. So what my best guess is the way that my grandma was approaching the mapo tofu. She was trying to make it sweeter so that you could get a bunch of little kids to eat it. So what I have done, what I like to do, so this is going to be 2 tablespoons of mirin, which is a Japanese rice wine. Definitely doesn't belong in Chinese cooking. But it's a little bit sweeter than the alternative that you would often come across, which would be Shaoxing wine, or essentially dry cooking sherry. And I have leaned into using that mirin in a mapo tofu more often than not, because I think it gives us something a little bit more sweet than you would otherwise come across. Next up is about a tablespoon of oyster sauce. That's going to give us a little bit of fishy umami. And then I'm going to follow that up. This is going to be 2 tablespoons. Yeah, 2 tablespoons of spicy black bean paste. So spicy black bean paste. Hard to locate, and it looks a lot like this. What we're looking for is the old grandma on it. So very often you'll see me refer to something called lao gan ma, which is most often when you see the words lao gan ma come up, we're referring to lao gan ma, the brand. And the brand, their flagship element that comes from lao gan ma is a chili crisp oil, which is essentially red chili flake that's fermented in, I believe it's done in soybean oil. They make many other things. One of my favorite things that they make is a spicy bean paste, which looks like this, and is essentially black bean paste, same thing that you would use in a jjajangmyeon, but it's done in that same kind of spicy chili crisp oil. If you can't find this stuff, you can also just use a black bean paste and then supplement it with a little bit of chili crisp or lao gan ma. Also very tasty. So by the way, if we're looking, so if we're paying attention, what you most often would see when referring to lao gan ma is this one, which is spicy chili crisp. What we're working with today is spicy black bean paste, which looks very similar. Same jars. Low-key lettuce is good. I use a cooker or a regular pot for rice. I use both. Usually when I'm cooking at home, I'll use a rice cooker. I'll probably be working with a zozurishi. Specifically today, I'm actually eating leftover rice because I have a whole bunch of leftover rice from the food pop-up, fried rice pop-ups that we've been doing. So this is actually just rice. And you can actually see this is a little burnt spot. Those burnt spots, they happen when you cook in a pot. So I cooked this in a big old stock pot. I cooked 45 cups of rice all at once. And that's why I have so much left over. So you could do either. You could also do it in an Instapot too, which is the main thing that I use my Instapot for, is to cook rice. I actually don't think that it's necessarily that much quicker to do it in an Instapot. And I also don't think that it yields rice that's very good. So I have not been in the habit of using my Instapot for cooking rice because I think it makes crappy rice. So look, you suck at making rice. Oh man, yeah, I could definitely help with that. Real quick, right now this is going to be a single tablespoon of gochujang. In a more traditional mapo tofu, you would probably see a Chinese doubanjiang, which is a spicy, like fermented chili paste. Gochujang is essentially the equivalent, but it comes from Korean cuisine. And it's a little bit more paste-like and also like more syrupy. It has a lot more sugar content to it, so again, we're leaning into those sweet qualities that I think my grandma was looking for. Yeah. But yeah, low-key lettuce. So if you suck at making rice, I could definitely help with that. We actually did a whole video about it when we did, or I did a whole video about it when I did the, we made gimbap. I can find that recipe. There it is. So this is the gimbap recipe that I did a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago even. And in that recipe, I kind of ran through all of the ways that I like to approach making rice. That's specifically for sushi rice, but you just skip one step and it's normal rice. So yeah, but hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, cool. So I'm whisking. So you'll notice that I don't often do this, but I just switched to a fork. The reason that I switched to a fork is because when you work with gochujang, you can see it here. It clumps up really aggressively because it is a very, very clumpy quality to it. So what we want to do anytime that we're working with gochujang is make sure that we break up those large clumps. Otherwise, that gochujang, it's going to be floating around in the wok fry, which is not good. Then you're going to have a whole bunch of like clumpy stuff floating around. Not attractive. All right, so the last thing that we're going to use today, so this is going to be some canned corn. Not my favorite thing to be using today. What I most often, and I think in the original mapo tofu recipe that I used, was frozen peas. I'm more preferential to using peas in the mapo tofu. That's definitely what my grandma was doing too. You can really get away with using any kind of veggie that you want, like kernel veggie that you want. You can use peas, corn, carrots work really well, and pretty much anything, any kind of veggie that you would throw in a fried rice is going to work out okay. What I do like saying though is that if you are going to use a veggie, you probably want to be using a frozen veggie because it's going to help keep those veggies nice and crisp. So when we work with frozen peas, for example, what we'll do is very, very late. It will literally be the last thing that goes into the wok fry before we pull it off heat. We don't have any frozen peas today. I also don't have any frozen corn today either because they're all in our kitchen. So I'm using some canned corn. What we're going to do is have to work around all of that and be very, very careful about making sure that that corn, it doesn't turn into a mush because if we're not careful, that's what happens when you work with canned veggies. All right, last up, this is maybe the single most important thing that goes in, not just mapo tofu, but really any kind of Szechuan stir fry. This is about a tablespoon of Szechuan peppercorn. So the Szechuan peppercorn is the quintessential and iconic flavor that you know from literally any kind of Szechuan food. At least any kind of Szechuan food that's spicy, it's coming from these Szechuan peppercorns. They're super, super iconic. It's the quality that you will often see referred to as numbing spice because it kind of makes your mouth go numb a little bit. And it's that iconic quality that comes from Szechuan food. So very, very important. The number one thing that you want to make sure you don't forget is this Szechuan peppercorn, and I actually forget to use it a lot. Also, very often what I have seen in a lot of like Chinese, Americanized Chinese recipes is they'll omit this Szechuan peppercorn and they'll replace it with red chili flake, which is a little bit more like mellow and more definitely like more of an Americanized quality to it. I don't think my grandma used any of those things. I think she just didn't make it spicy at all. But that's my grandma. All right, so last up, this is the actual last thing that we're going to do this time. This is going to be 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, which we're going to dissolve in about a 1/4 cup of water or so. The quantity of water, not super important. What's more important is how much cornstarch we're using, and thoroughly make sure to dissolve it. So what we're going to do here is you often see this referred to as a cornstarch slurry. And essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that this cornstarch is not in a solid form. So if you throw cornstarch straight into a wok fry, cornstarch has this habit of literally clumping up with anything that it comes into contact with. It'll clump up with meat, it clumps up with proteins, veggies, literally anything that it touches that's not water, not cold water specifically, it will start clumping up. So very, very frustrating. All of these are things that I have actually done too. So when you're working with cornstarch in a cornstarch slurry, very important. Dissolve it in water, and then we're going to add it to our wok fry. That's going to go in at the very, very end, and that's going to be how we create nice, thick, cohesive sauces in our wok fry, is from that cornstarch. Cool. Now we can head over to the stove. Yeah. Crystal, what about whiskey? Yeah, I did forget the whiskey. I will never say no to whiskey, I'm gonna be honest. Today I'm drinking bourbon, by the way, for the first time in a while. But the bourbon that I'm drinking is very Scotch-like. I mean, this is the reason why I like it, is because it tastes like a Scotch. It's also in a Scotch flask. There you go. Yeah. Am I Yan Can Cook's nephew? I am not. Yan Can Cook, for those not familiar, Yan Can Cook was a show, PBS show from the 90s run by a guy named Martin Yan. And his tagline was, Yan Can Cook, so can you. So, that's the namesake and inspiration of the series. And the YouTube channel and the Reddit channel, all of those things, they all come from that inspiration. So, I used to watch that show when I was a little kid because I think we only had basic cable when I was like a young kid. So I watched it. We have channels 1 through 12, and PBS I think was channel 9. So it was oftentimes it was the thing that I would watch because it was either that or I would have to watch like Taxi, which is no kids wants to watch that. Drink it out of the flask. I try not to drink it out of the flask because then you backwash into the flask, and it's gross. Arthur, yeah, Arthur and Wishbone. I used to watch a lot of Wishbone. All of those are PBS shows. PBS had great content in the 90s. I can't believe more people don't appreciate it. They had a lot of really great content. All right, so over on the stove, I've got my wok heating up. It's about 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, maybe a little bit less than that, actually. Usually might need more peanut oil. There we go. And then we're going to start things off with our aromatic elements going in first. Here's my garlic, followed by my ginger, and finally the whites of my green onions. Then we're going to saute that for about 10 seconds. What we're doing now is paying attention to how it looks and smells, or really how it smells. So use your nose at this point. We're looking for a lot of fragrance to start coming out of here. If you don't start smelling garlic and ginger, it's probably a bad sign. It probably means there's something wrong with your garlic or your ginger. But for me, that usually takes about 10 seconds. Then next going in, this is my ground turkey. We're using turkey today. Going in. I'm doing a little bit of an effort to make sure that when it gets into the wok fry, we're really just trying to make sure that we're not adding like really clumpy ground mince here. So we want that stuff to be broken up, otherwise we're going to have like large chunks of ground turkey floating around, which is not great. So we're gonna let that go for maybe another minute or so. Wishbone was your favorite? Yeah, I used to watch a lot of Wishbone. Justin Wilson, I don't remember Justin Wilson. Please enlighten me. I don't remember a lot of things from the 90s. But I don't know how conscious I was, or like how much like conscious memories I actually have from the early 90s. So. Alright. Yeah. The Frugal Gourmet, I do remember that one. I also remember a lot of like Emeril Lagasse, Ming Tsai, Simply Ming. I used to watch a lot of Simply Ming, who's doing a lot of stuff with Kenji Lopez lately, which is cool. A Talk Boy, I didn't. I had friends that had a Talk Boy though. I didn't have a lot of the cool toys. I was not a cool kid. Or a Tamagotchi, I had a Tamagotchi. I had a Game Boy, but I had a Game Boy really late though. It took me a long time to get a Game Boy. Alright. So you'll notice, so what we did with that ground pork, or ground turkey actually is what we're using, is we added about half a tablespoon of cornstarch to that marinade. And that cornstarch is doing a lot of work right now. What it does is it slows down the exterior cook time of our pork turkey. And that just kind of allows that pork or turkey, the ground mince, to kind of fully cook before the exterior reaches its cooking point. And it kind of keeps that pork or turkey from getting overcooked in the wok fry because we're cooking on such high heat. Next up, that's my tofu going in. We're working with, this is soft silk tofu. So very, very important, since we're working with soft silk tofu, is once that tofu is in the wok, I'm being very, very careful. We're not doing any more aggressive tossing anymore because that tofu is super delicate. So if you keep doing aggressive tossing at this point, that tofu is going to start coming apart and then you're going to have crumbled tofu. So I'm not doing any kind of like hard shuffling anymore. We're just really gently going underneath and turning. Yeah. Justin Wilson's the man. Yeah, I gotta look him up. Pokemon Red. I had Pokemon Red. And my brother had Pokemon Blue. And then later on, like almost when Pokemon wasn't cool anymore, I got Pokemon Yellow, which is the same game except Pikachu follows you around when you're walking around. And I think it was in color. It was also in color too. So last thing that we're gonna add here is our corn, which you'll notice that I'm reserving very, very late. Because we're not working with frozen corn today, we're working with canned corn. If we throw that corn in too early, it's going to start turning mushy, which is not what we're after. So I'm going to hold it off until the very, very end. It's literally going to go in and then we're going to pull it out of the wok fry. So before we do that, I'm adding, that's my cornstarch slurry. And we're giving that a little bit of a shake. And you'll notice that once that cornstarch gets into the wok, it's going to tighten up our sauce quite a bit. We're going to start developing, that's going to go from like a liquidy and watery quality to it, to a much tighter piece of sauce. There we go. Yeah. We live the same life, yeah, same. Pretty much. I wonder, maybe those are universal 90s experiences. I don't know. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. My childhood was unique. Alright, so here's our corn. I don't particularly love using corn in the mapo tofu. I think that it doesn't look as pretty as the peas. I think it maybe tastes the same. You get the similar qualities of sweetness. But I always thought that mapo tofu looks better with something green on top, which comes from those peas. But if you don't have peas, corn is going to work just fine too. Yeah, it's just all with. That might be too much corn. We'll see. Yeah, it might be too much corn. Alright, so let's pull this out. Last thing that we want to do anytime that we're working in a carbon steel wok is give that wok a rinse while it's still hot. While it's hot, it has this nice non-stick surface to it. Once it cools down, you're going to have a lot more trouble getting that thing to clean because stuff is going to start sticking to it, especially if you're using a lot of sugar in your wok fry like we just did. That sugar is going to start crystallizing and it's going to stick to the wok. So if you go and say like sit down and start eating and then come back to clean your wok, you're going to have this experience where you're going to have to start scrubbing a lot of stuff off of your wok, which is never fun. So do yourself a favor. It will take you maybe 10 seconds to clean your wok while it's hot, probably closer to 5 minutes when you try and clean it when it's cold. That's it. Ready to cook again. Yeah. Cool. So the last thing that we're going to do here is back over on our cutting board. Here's our finished mapo tofu. And where's my sieve? So optional, this is technically an optional step, but what I like to do is pass my Szechuan peppercorn through a sieve. And what that's going to do is sort of like sort out a lot of those, like the peppercorn flowers, which is all that white stuff that's sticking around there. That's technically not a big deal. That stuff is totally edible. You probably end up just like picking it out, the kind of the stuff that gets stuck in your teeth a lot. But if you're really paying attention, it's nice to go the extra mile and sieve that stuff out so you don't end up eating it. People will complain otherwise. Or also, what the other thing that I like doing, especially if I'm feeling lazy, or especially if I forgot, it's the same reason why I keep my Szechuan peppercorn in a pepper grinder. You can totally just grind that stuff up straight into the wok fry. What I do like doing though is like adding it at the very end, which is what we're doing right now. Because what happens is, once it makes contact with that hot oil, it starts releasing a lot of that capsaicin. If you add it too early, what it ends up doing is it sort of like mellows out quite a bit, so you can like cook out a lot of that aggressive flavor from it, and then you end up with a much more mellow quality to your Szechuan peppercorn. Which, if that's your thing, you can totally do it. Yeah. So I'm serving this over some rice, and we should be ready to eat. I guess I should give this a try. Yeah, I do think this looks better with the frozen peas. I think it's prettier. I think it's going to taste the same. I don't think that the yellow contrasts nicely with the mapo tofu. Ooh, we're on the wrong camera. My bad, guys. Great tips. Oh yeah, totally. Glad that was helpful. So last thing that we're going to add, this is going to be the greens of our green onions, which should give it a nice pop of color, I guess. And that ought to do it. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Cool. Wow, that's like one of the fastest streams we've done in a while. This has been taking too long to stream lately. Hello to everyone just tuning in. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, by the way. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 PST. With new recipes up on my YouTube channel every Friday. So we've got a new recipe coming out this Friday, so tomorrow, for a hot and spicy chow mein. If you're here in the Bay Area, that's inspired by the one that you can find at Shandong here in Oakland. Someone from the Oakland subreddit actually requested it, so that's how I ended up doing that. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely find your way over to the YouTube channel. For those who have caught this series before, usually what you'll find when we're cooking on the live stream is I'm probably cooking through one of the recipes that have already come out on the channel. So that hot and spicy chow mein, we'll cook through it live next Tuesday. And then next Thursday, I forget what we're cooking, but the mapo tofu that we're cooking today is actually one of the very first recipes that came out on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking up or looking for how to cook all of the things that we're cooking, that's a good place to go and check out because there's a lot more recipes that live over there. We're also working our way up to 5,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. Lots of fun stuff coming up very soon. Yeah. Cool. What else? Oh yeah, we have a couple of series that are in progress. That hot and spicy chow mein that I mentioned earlier is part of a larger series that we're doing, which is inspired a bunch of recipes that are inspired by dishes that you can find at restaurants here in the Oakland/San Francisco area. So that one's coming from a restaurant. It's a really popular restaurant in Oakland called Shandong. We did vermicelli noodle, a lemongrass chicken over vermicelli noodles last Friday. That's inspired by one that you can find at Miss Saigon in Oakland off Grand Avenue. All of these are places that I have probably lived very close to, or at some point. Miss Saigon, I actually used to live next door to it, so a takeout spot that I used to order a lot. So that's how I ended up doing that dish. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely make your way over to YouTube. Check out what's going on over there. Cool, let's give this a try. Oh yeah. It's a very nostalgic dish for me. Hey, there's Ham Charo. That's Ham Charo, by the way. Ham Charo is the hamster that eats ramen. He only gets to eat ramen when somebody subscribes. So please feed Ham Charo. He's very hungry. Yeah, he is. Cool. Yeah, one of my favorite stir fries of all time. Maybe because it's like really nostalgic for me, but also it's just like really quick. By the way, we cooked it in under 45 minutes. Actually, people weren't donating their time. We would have been able to finish it. We don't often finish recipes this quickly, so it's a really quick stir fry to throw it together. But also, it's just like one that I've been eating since I was a little kid. So this is like very, very loosely inspired by the one that I used to make, which linked more into sweetness and kind of like it was a little bit closer to how you would make a chili. I think that's what my grandma was trying to do, is trick her grandchildren into eating Chinese food who really just wanted to eat like American food. So yeah. Hachi Hachi, yeah, what are we cooking today? So this is a Szechuan dish called mapo tofu, which leans on a couple of things. Probably the most Szechuan thing about it today is the Szechuan Peppercorn, which is the peppercorn that causes the numbing sensation in your mouth. Lots of people will refer to it as numbing spice. So if you see dishes that are like, there's a lot of dishes on our menu items that will often be referred to things like numbing beef or numbing chicken, numbing fried chicken, numbing popcorn chicken, stuff like that. What that's doing is it's using that Szechuan peppercorn and it causes this numbing sensation in your mouth. That's like a really, really iconic thing that comes from Szechuan food. So that's where that's coming from. Really annoying. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, what we're cooking today is a mapo tofu, which is like loosely inspired by the version that my grandma used to make. I think mostly what she was doing was replicating a lot of the qualities that came from two other things that my grandma used to make that I used to eat a lot, which was number one was her chili, but number two was her bolognese sauce. So I think that's like what she was trying to do is make it a little bit more like that so she could get a bunch of little kids to eat it. So cool. What we did today is we substituted the dobanjang that you would traditionally find in a mapo tofu with some gochujang, which comes from Korean food. And we also substituted the Shaoxing wine, which you would more typically see in a mapo tofu, with some mirin, which add a little bit more sweetness and like just sweetness to it. So today we did this with some corn. More typically you would see this done with peas, maybe even carrots. Generally those are going to be frozen veggies though. Cool. I think that's it, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes, so feel free and drop those questions in the chat. I missed stuff sometimes, so let me know if I missed anything. And we'll be back next Tuesday doing the hot and spicy chow mein that's coming out on the YouTube channel tomorrow. So, by the way, if you're on the Reddit channel, you haven't checked out the YouTube channel yet, that's a fun place to go. We have that second live stream that's popping up behind me. That's where it's going. There's also a whole schedule of everything that we're going to be live streaming coming up. So, all of those things, they live over on the YouTube channel. So, if you're interested in that stuff, definitely hop over. Help us hit our subscriber goal. We're working our way up to 5,000 subs by the end of the month. So, please help out. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.
all the time. You're as smooth as Tennessee whiskey. You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're bad. Glass of brandy, darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
Stop flipping for my enemy.